So in a previous video that I put out in the winter, I detailed a few different recipes that one could use when cooking with a common, weed called ground ivy or Glaucoma heteracea. And so in this video, I want to expand on one of those recipes with continuing to experiment with making mayonnaise, right? And I'm kind of on this quest to make mayonnaise from 100% locally sourced ingredients. And so this video is going to kind of detail where I'm at with that right now, along with some ideas for in the future that I might try to pursue to be able to attain that goal of 100% locally produced ingredients for mayonnaise. This spring, as ground ivy has really started to take off in my garden and it has been going into bloom and spreading all over the place, I've been trying to get more creative with how I can use ground ivy in the kitchen, how I can get the most food value and nutrition from this plant in the process of weeding it out or harvesting. So we have a basic core of ingredients. The egg yolk, of course, or egg yolks, depending on how large of a batch we're gonna make, is important because it contains lecithin, right? And lecithin is this compound that allows oil and water to mix together, right? We all know with like the classic salad dressing, if you take, olive oil and vinegar and you shake it up, those two compounds will very quickly separate and you'll have the water layer and the oil film or layer on top. And so lecithin actually enables water and oil to mix together. So the egg yolk is important. Another core addition is mustard seed, right? Ground mustard seed. This may help to stabilize the emulsification. Not totally sure, but it can also add flavor as well, like that mustard type pungency that's very notable. And the mustard seed may also be some sort of preservative as well. Naturally, it may be antimicrobial. And then we also add in some sort of acid that can also have preservation qualities, but it can also have flavor enhancing qualities as well. Classically, it's usually either lemon juice or vinegar. And then we'll typically add in some sort of oil. A lot of people use some sort of vegetable oil like canola oil, corn oil, those types of oils that may provide texture enhancements to the mayonnaise, but in terms of human health effects, they might not be so stellar. But what I want to do is I want to take these ingredients and I want to really localize them as much as possible, right? So the eggs I get from a local farm down the street, and that's about as local as I want to get, especially when it comes to like animals, like chickens. At least at this point in my life. And then in terms of the mustard seed, I have two local options that are readily available right now. Garlic mustard is currently in flower, but that will be going to seed in, it's already starting to form some of those seed pods, and those will probably be setting seed in the next few weeks. Then we also have the horseradish root. I do have some horseradish on the property, and this root can be harvested and grated up and added into the mayonnaise. I find that actually for some reason had a pretty mild flavor. It doesn't have that classic horseradishy pungency. I don't know if there's some sort of chemical reaction going in there when you food process it up, or what may be going on there. When I add in mustard seed, that pungency is not lost. So I'll have to do some more experimentation with the horseradish. Maybe I'm just not adding in that much of it, or the mustard seed is just more potent because it's finely ground and it's the seed, so maybe some of those chemicals are more concentrated in the seed comparatively to the horseradish root. And then I also wonder about the garlic mustard. Back a few years ago when I made a mustard condiment from garlic mustard seed, it had a really strong flavor, right? Really strong mustard pungency. So you probably might not need to add a whole bunch of that into the mayonnaise either. But the horseradish, you might have to double or triple. I'm not totally sure yet. I still kind of have some more experimentation to do to really kind of hash out what's going on there. So homemade vinegar is a possibility, but it's not necessarily readily available, right? There's a process that goes into making it. But what is readily available, especially this time of the year, in copious quantities, is rhubarb, right? And it has a very sour, acidic type flavor to it. Now, I've tried adding the rhubarb in raw, and I found that actually it has a very fibrous texture to it that's not really all that great when you're making mayonnaise. So what I've done to circumvent that issue is I cook the rhubarb ahead of time, right, until it softens up, it turns that paler green color. And then I also add in with that some zest from the trifoliate orange. I've done some other videos on the trifoliate orange. I've also done some videos on rhubarb a few years ago, but last year I did a couple of videos on the trifoliate orange. It is a hardy citrus that can grow up here in the zone 6 to 7, in this zone 6 to 7 climate. It can survive the winter conditions, the freezing sub-freezing temperatures. It's a very interesting plant overall. I've also wondered about drying lemon balm and adding that in like a powdered form to as a group for the acidifying agent, because the rhubarb stalk really adds the sourness, the zest kind of adds some citrusy vibrance and stuff, but maybe the lemon balm might add kind of a different aromatic lemony type quality to it. I don't know. So that would definitely be some experimentation. I feel like a bit of a food scientist here. Maybe I'm trying a little too hard to try and reinvent you know, lemon or something, but I'm doing it in a context of local food sourced off the landscape, not stuff that's made in the lab. So then I add in the chopped ground ivy leaves, so I will pre-chop them with a knife ahead of time on a cutting board, and then I will add them in. However, I'm thinking actually it might be better to add these in first and then the cooked rhubarb stalks, so that those can get mixed together ahead of time before making the rest of the mayonnaise, because otherwise when you start making the rest of this recipe, you know, the emulsification happens in this mayonnaise and it gets thicker and thicker and thicker, so it's harder for these ground ivy leaves to really kind of get mixed into the whole thing effectively. So if you have more of a liquid type medium type solution that you're working with ahead of time, then you can add this ground ivy and rhubarb into the mixture to be emulsified at that point. So, you know, the order in which you do things is probably going to be beneficial if you are mindful about it. So once we get our rhubarb and ground ivy leaves and mixed together, and we have that base of the mayonnaise component, then what we can do slowly as we make that mayonnaise, we can add in our oil. Some people don't like the strong flavor of olive oil. I am not one of those people. I do like the olive oil, but it's definitely not very local to my climate, to my area. So this is one thing that is speculative. I haven't tried it yet, so I have a question mark here, is could I use sunflower oil, right, or sunflower seed butter or some type of sunflower meal or something like that. I am going to be growing a bunch of sunflowers this year, so that may be an option I might be able to kind of experiment, play around with. But this oil component so far is the only ingredient that is not local, right, when I'm making mayonnaise currently. So hopefully that I can figure out a way to change that soon. And then finally, once I have made this mayonnaise, I found that the flavor isn't quite as balanced, right? It doesn't have the sweetness that maybe to help balance out some of those other flavors that we have between the savory, the you know, spicy, the sour, and whatnot. That sweetness component is really kind of lacking. So to create more of a complete flavor profile, I thought, well, what local food could I add to help increase that sweetness, right? And so I grow a bunch of parsnips in my garden, and the parsnip roots, when you cook them up, have a really nice, gentle, sweet flavor. And they also have like a thick, pasty type texture, which I think also kind of enhances that mayonnaise quality. Of course, it's important to cook them up first, otherwise they're gonna be tough and fibrous. But I found that I can just cook them up until, you know, they're softened all the way through, and I add those in there, and it really adds some nice texture, some nice sweetness in there. There's also a little bit of like, just like a very faint kind of minty, carroty type overtone to it, which I think is really nice. So this is pretty much the base recipe that I'm working with right now, and kind of some different ideas that I'm thinking to kind of improve it and enhance it. But some other notes that I want to mention when I make mayonnaise, that like this is what I keep in mind. We can either whisk mayonnaise together by hand, or we can use more technological means such as a blender or food processor. I find that the blender works really well at mixing the components, the ingredients together much more finely, it's more of a homogeneous mixture. Whereas with a food processor, it's kind of a slower rotation, so things aren't necessarily going to mix together as uniformly, such as like ground ivy leaf particles. It's really not that huge of a deal, but I do find that the food processor works a lot better, especially when these ingredients are getting mixed together, and that emulsification is taking place, and that solution is getting thicker and thicker. The food processor is much easier to work with, whereas the blender, a lot of the ingredients will gum up above the blades, and then you'll have to constantly like stop the blender, get it down back to the blades, get the mixture down back to the blades, put the lid back on, and then run it again, and repeat that process for a bunch of times until you get more of a consistency in a mix that you're happy with. This is basically where I'm at with my process of making ground ivy mayonnaise. I've also had some ideas of making mayonnaise with the other herb, lovage, instead, to kind of see what types of flavor that might throw, right? It has a very sweet, spicy, herbal type flavor to it. It might be a very interesting thing to throw in there and substitute for the ground ivy, but that would be an experimentation for another time. Thank you so much for checking out this video on homemade mayonnaise with ground ivy. Of course, this is a work in progress, or an experiment in progress, so there will probably be more videos to come on this topic as I continue to experiment and change things up and kind of see what works and what doesn't. So thanks so much for watching, and I look forward to seeing you in a future video. Take care.